what happens is in the 1990s, the desert tortoise becomes a thing, right? It's protected under the Endangered Species Act.
It wasn't. It didn't just like magically appear, but the Fish and Wildlife in '95, I think, Fish and Wildlife said the desert tortoise is an endangered animal. Is that right?
so it was before '95.
Oh, okay.
So and yeah, we're all like youngish, right? But my grandparents were here in the mid '90s, and I remember talking about this. So in the early '90s, the desert tortoise becomes protected.
Okay.
And nobody really knew what that meant. We weren't really sure how many there were. We knew there were some around the St. George area, but nobody really knew what that meant. And the big eye opener was Tuacahn. So they're developing Tuacahn at the time, like actually building the amphitheater. And the road from Ivins to Tuacahn, which back then was longer without, like now it has a lot of houses along it. But back then it was just kind of nothing from Ivins to Tuacahn. Someone hit a tortoise.
From St. George to Tuacahn, there was basically nothing. Like if we're honest with ourselves, there was nothing. Yeah.
So they're building that. Someone hits and kills a tortoise on the road, going into Tuacahn, and because it's now protected, all these things get triggered, and the Fish and Wildlife Service comes in and says, "Stop construction on Tuacahn," and Tuacahn's like, "Wait, what?" Like it was just a tortoise, and everybody's kind of like, it's a light bulb moment. And the Fish and Wildlife Service says, okay, what you can do is you can't use motorized vehicles, but if you want to haul all of your construction equipment in on old hay wagons pulled by horses, then you can keep doing construction. And so workers are riding bikes or catching rides on these wagons that are hauling all the material in from Ivins to Tuacahn. And that was everybody's like, oh, this desert tortoise thing could really impact us.
So they kept going with carts. They actually did that? Oh my gosh. I want to find old pictures. I got to go to the Santa Clara Library.
If anybody can find me a picture, I've been looking for one, right?
Okay, yeah.
So that happens. And if you look on the map, Tuacahn's this little like appendix shaped thing.
Mal, could you just scroll in just a little bit now that we kind of looked at that 30,000? You're the best. I appreciate you. So yeah, that little tiny white spot between...
Private land.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. That tiny little white spot in the red. Yep. Right there.
And so we realized pretty soon that so that's Tuacahn. We realized that there were basically no protection. So anywhere that anybody was developing anything in St. George, and we were developing quickly in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
If you see a desert tortoise, we didn't have anything in place. And so your construction would just stop until you work something out. And maybe the temporary solution is don't use motorized stuff, but you can't develop without motorized equipment, right?
Yeah.
So,
or you can, it's just very slow.
Right.
Very slow.
It's not very profitable.
Yeah.
So the city and the counties and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is they exist to protect endangered species, all get together and say, okay, let's come up with a plan. And you present a plan that says, we know that we're going to ask for permit that allows us to do things that are going to harm a protected species. And in return for that harm, we're going to do all these other things that benefit, and it's like a scale that you've got to balance out. So the county said, all of this white land we want to be able to develop. We want private property owners to be able to develop their property.
As the Constitution allows us, yes. Perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
So that's the starting point. And so that's the ask. And then the thing that we offer up to do benefit is we say, well, we'll create this reserve that'll be managed as open space to help the desert tortoises. And then when we find desert tortoises, like on Four Master Ridge, they still find tortoises on Four Master Ridge, we can move them into the reserve. We have a safe place to move them to, and we can just help with the tortoise recovery efforts. So the reserve, a lot of people don't know this, the reserve goes from the top of Red Mountain in Ivins, like it borders the Shivwoods Reservation, all the way to Laverkin. It, like I-15 crosses it. Like it is a huge area of land that we've set aside since. So then that was the plan that was presented in 1995. So that's when the tortoise is listed earlier, but our actual plan is 1995.
So for the sake of not going back too far, but maybe you can help me enlighten me on this. I got into a discussion with somebody in the comments. I think this was on Facebook. It was on Facebook. And I started doing some research on where is this tortoise protected. So this tortoise lives, we're on the very edge of its habitat.
Correct.
and it goes all the way south into California, south, all through San Bernardino County, half of San Bernardino County, almost all of Riverside County, down to the border of Texas, and then into the Sonoran Desert. Is that accurate?
And I don't know. I just know inside the states.
Okay.
Right. And
so this is what I've recognized, and there's something like 15 million acres of protected tortoise land in just the United States. So there's not any. So there's like additional. So I get that it's an endangered species, and then they only live if a tortoise is born, they'll only travel like 200 yards from the place that they're born. This is just the research from the Fish and Wildlife. This is what I was reading, and I couldn't help but think in the 90s, what out of all that 76% of federal land that they had, much of which is all in protected tortoise territory, what made them say this is what needed, where this is where it needed to be protected? Do you know anything about that?
So again, none of us were there at that time. My understanding is that it was a mix of where they knew tortoises were and areas that people were saying, hey, this would be good to protect. And you'll notice, I mean, almost everywhere where it is red rock.
Yeah.
Right. And and it's kind of interesting. The Babylon Road area on the other side of I-15 north of Hurricane is also all in the reserve.
And insanely beautiful, by the way.
Isn't it? So you're right. It's one of the most beautiful places in our county. It had 0 tortoises in the 90s. There were no tortoises out there, but everybody said, let's protect that too. And so
in the name of this tortoise.
So that became our translocation place. If tortoises have been found over the last 30 years, they've all moved into that Babylon Road area. Now that area has high enough densities that they're not moving them in there anymore.
Right. Okay.
So
Courtney wants to say something. Jump in, Courtney.
I was just going to say, I think it's amazing that back in the 90s, Washington County voluntarily, the leaders of the community at the time said, let's designate this reserve for the protection of the tortoise, but also for the beautiful spaces that we have here in our county. I just think that's amazing. And I don't know if anywhere else, do you know, Eric, where the community has been proactive in the way this community has?
So there are other places, but I think it's a good, you can compare us to the Las Vegas area, to Clark County, right? Because same animal, same time frame.
Yeah.
Same
also
rapid development,
yeah.
Right? We create this permanent open space to the north of our community that we all now love and recreate in, and like it's part of our community. In Clark County, they didn't do a reserve-based plan. They just said, we'll charge an impact fee and take that money and then spend it on something to help the tortoise. So they didn't set aside land. And again, I like how we did it better.
I'm pretty sure they have like 3 designated reserve areas though in southern Nevada. And it might not be Clark County, but when I was looking at the map of the desert tortoise, like I just looked up just that one endangered species. I think there's 3 designated areas that are like 7 times larger than the Red Cliffs Desert Reserve.
Interesting.
That they have set aside for desert tortoises. So like, I just can't help but think there's more to the story than just the tortoise. Now, I think, to your point, Courtney, I think it's good that in that time frame, we came together as a community and understood that we want to conserve the most beautiful areas of the county.